Hi, I'm Jeremy Ruston, and welcome to the 50th TiddlyWiki Hangout. Today it's a very intimate gathering. It's me, Jeremy, and Stephan. Stephan, would you like to say hi and introduce yourself and say where you're from?
Hi, I'm Stephan from Germany and eagerly waiting for 15.0.13 to start contributing again.
Yes, indeed, and it'll be great to have 5.13 out. So what we thought we'd do is kick off, as we've been tending to recently, with with a quick review of recent changes to the core. So these are the changes that will come out in 5.0.13 beta in the next few days. So I'll switch to screen sharing, and hopefully, Stephan, you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, so.
But again, the top bar cannot be seen by me.
Yes, I think it's okay for other people from past performance.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it may just be a.
It's just an issue with my old Firefox.
I'm sorry about that. The thing I've been working on most recently is accessibility. So this started because a guy posted to the discussion group explaining that he used a screen reader and expressing the belief that we could do a better job of making TiddlyWiki work with screen readers. Simon, the chap concerned, very kindly went on to make me an MP3 of him using tiddlywiki.com with a screen reader to give me more of an insight into what the experience is like. So as a result of that, we've whizzed through and done some of what you might call the low-hanging fruit, and it is on things like these toolbar buttons. The button element now contains a title field and an area label field. So the title field is what gets used as a tooltip. So now if you hover over these buttons, you get the expected tooltip explaining their function. So hopefully that will help everybody, sighted or non-sighted. The area label attribute provides a word that's a brief description of the control that is read by the screen reader when you move to it. So that's why the label just says info, where the title says the full show information for this tiddler. So the vast majority of what we've been doing so far has been that. So for instance, these X buttons in the Open tab used to just have the text X, and so they were read by the screen reader, in fact, as a times button, I think. So now we've given it a label and a title. And similarly, the guy here for triggering advanced search, and the button here for hiding and showing the toolbar, sidebar, sorry. So all of those now read much better on a screen reader. There's still a lot more to do though. The edit template is still a bit of a mess. Simon read through me or showed me the sequence for adding a tag, for instance, and it's a bit of a nightmare, I think. And it also seems to me like it would be very hard for anybody to work out how it worked, if you see what I mean. You can work out how to do it with a screen reader if you're familiar with what it does, but I think very difficult to work out from scratch.
Maybe, sorry, Jeremy, maybe if the tags would not be this custom drop-down, but a real drop-down, maybe that would help, because we must be able to handle that.
I thought this too. I thought, gosh, wouldn't... but it turns out, to my surprise, Simon doesn't think that kind of thing is an issue. So the thing that struck me was when using a screen reader, you, for instance, change tabs, that comes across as clicking on a button called recent. But there's no audible feedback that this area underneath has changed, which maybe there are screen readers that can be adjusted to do that, but it means that some of the one of the really basic things that you rely on for sighted users doesn't appear to work with screen readers, which is that the reason why a sighted user knows that these tabs control what's displayed here is by essentially trying it out and seeing the interactivity. So now if you don't get any feedback as you flick through the tabs, I don't really understand how you could discover what's changed on the screen other than by scanning the whole screen. To Stephan's point, I was very surprised that this was okay, but it seems like it's fine, and the reason why it's fine, I guess, is because all of this accessibility infrastructure that we're using here, or these accessibility features, were really designed to retrofit accessibility onto websites and web applications that hadn't been created with it in mind. And so it seems as though the technologies do a surprisingly good job of making common user interface paradigms that we use for sighted users. They make a surprisingly good job of making those paradigms accessible for screen reader users. But I'm still interested in the idea that if we designed the user interface of TiddlyWiki from the ground up for screen reader users, that you would end up with something very different. So from what I've seen so far, with a screen reader, well, so let me put it the other way around. When we deal with sighted users, one of the main ways that we hide complexity is by hiding things. So I mean, literally, all of these user interface gubbins here, flicking open the advanced search box, it's all about hiding things so that they're only available in response to interactions, so that the overall appearance, you could imagine a front page of TiddlyWiki that exposed all of these features, and it would be confusing and confusing, I think, for a sighted user. But for a screen reader user, it's not so clear that they, obviously with a screen reader, there's no burden from being on a page that's got a lot of information on it, because by definition the screen reader is only ever going to be reading you what's at a sort of cursor within that page. So that really changes things. That suddenly the effect of having a complex page doesn't necessarily translate into cognitive complexity for the user when you're using a screen reader. So that's one thing. Instead of hiding and showing things with a screen reader, it appears as though it's a reasonable strategy to leave everything in the DOM and to provide means for navigating to the functions. So it feels to me as though perhaps with a screen reader, it might feel like the user was exploring, I don't know, a relatively complex hierarchical menu, I guess, in order to locate the functions that they need, rather than hiding and showing user interface widgets. So we'll see. I as well as Simon, the chap from Austria has kindly been providing feedback on screen reader usage. I have been experimenting with turning the screen reader function on my Mac. On the Mac, the screen reader is basically built into the OS and has pretty good support from Safari, the default Apple browser. So that's giving me at least the ability to experiment with how the technology works. But of course, you really need an actual user like Simon in order to be able to really learn about what it feels like for a user.
Mario joined.
Oh, great. So let me... Mario, hello. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm fine. Hello.
Glad you could make it. Good to see you. Perhaps you should introduce yourself, sorry, after...
Yeah, my name is Mario Pitsch from Austria, near Salzburg, contributor to TiddlyWiki Classic and TiddlyWiki 5.
And I think we're now just about a year since we started doing these Hangouts, I think. We're at number 50, so in fact, having missed a few weeks, we must be just over a year. And I think you've been on virtually all of them, Mario.
Yeah, a lot. But I'm a little bit behind with the annotations, so I'm with I don't know which one is it.
I think you might be a week behind, maybe.
No, it's 48. So I'm in the middle of 48. So.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. Much appreciated.
Expect them today.
Good. No, that's very cool. It does slightly make me pause occasionally when I realise how many days of the last year I've spent in Hangouts, because it's about 2.5 days now last year. But still, as I always say, I get a heap out of it. So we're just starting to talk about recent changes for 5.0.13, and we were talking about accessibility. And so far, we were just really talking about these changes where certain controls that didn't have them have now gained a title attribute and an area label attribute. And that's worked reasonably well. A very controversial thing that we have done is made the page title be an H1 and made the tiddler titles be an H2, but we've left it that the first top level title within a tiddler is an H1. So if I put a heading at the top of this tiddler, you can now see that's an H1. We've got an H2 there containing it and an H1 back there. My first thought was that this H1 should be automatically bumped to be an H3 in order that we maintain the correct nesting of headings. But looking at other blogs, it seems as though people aren't too hung up about that. So I chose a Dactyos journal to show you because this is Jeremy Keith, who's very well known as a as a web developer with this, with some interest in and reputation for getting HTML right. So he's got the site logo, the site title is an H1, and a blog entry like this is also an H1. So I think that the reason why that's okay is because these H1s are in a different section than that one is in a header. So I'm not sure that we've necessarily got all our sections and headers and nav elements in place. That remains, there's another bit of work that remains to be done as part of the accessibility work. But this does suggest that my original naive reading that there should be only a single H1 on the page, for instance, is not in fact necessarily correct.
Yeah, I think I also did read a little bit more, and it turns out that the nesting is with sections and articles and all this stuff, and with TiddlyWiki it's a little bit, let's say, complicated, because one part of TiddlyWiki is a presentation of a blog-like thing, and the other part of TiddlyWiki is being an application. So if you want to have your own GTD or something like this, or getting things done stuff, or to-do lists or whatever, then it's more like an application. So it's it will be always a little bit difficult. But you have the possibility to have your own templates. So as you mentioned in the issue, so
what I haven't actually looked at, which I must, is how web applications like Gmail handle this kind of thing. I assume that
I think they have machine-built layout, because they have very strange classes and all this stuff. So I think it's not really a reference.
Well, I don't know, because the thing about those the screen readers is they ignore elements and attributes and classes that aren't relevant. So they see a massively, I mean, you're right, of course, if you do a view source on Gmail, that's nightmarish. But it seems, it would be perfectly possible for them to ensure that HTML was usable. Anyway, I'll do some checking out. There's a couple of other web apps that I use regularly that may be worth having a look at too.
Yeah. What did Simon say about the changes?
His feedback's really good. He thinks this has made. I mean, so to him, the time of the recording he sent me, when none of these buttons had labels, blank buttons just say button, and so is the least helpful thing. And so I think that my impression is that maybe we're in a first phase which is about ensuring that all the necessary information is in the version of the DOM that the screen reader speaks. And I think that's what we're sort of getting to here, where we're fixing bugs, really, things where not enough information was making it through to the DOM that the screen reader uses. But I think there is well, saying just as you came on, I'm very interested in even doing a quite radical theme, well, not theme, actually, layout for TiddlyWiki that's optimized for screen readers. And I'm speculating that such a user interface might be quite radically different from what we're used to, because it would do much less hiding and showing and try to reuse the screen reader's native navigation capabilities, like being able to click on
I also did read some information about screen readers, and it would be also possible with TiddlyWiki that you have something like a table of content and with the let's say executive summary, which sums up. I don't know if you have 5 tiddlers open, which sums up the tiddler titles with a description field. So if you have a description field. And so it gives you a short overview of all open tiddlers with, I don't know, 2 or 3 lines of text, which would be possible. Jeremy, Nathan joined.
Excellent. Nathan, hi, how are you doing?
Hello.
Hello, great. Glad you're here and mic'd up. Would you like to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nathan Kane. I'm a developer from the United States.
And great to have you here, Nathan. Nathan's been making lots of contributions to TiddlyWiki for quite a few months now, actually. We were just going through changes for 5.013, which I'm planning to release in the next 48 hours or so. One of the one we've just finished really is the first phase of making TiddlyWiki more accessible, and that's been about providing ARIA roles and titles for various buttons that were just showing up as blank buttons. And
Excellent.
as a side effect, we've got tooltips for sighted users as well, so that's good. Moving on, there was yet another report this week of somebody who was baffled by a what's the word? An extraneous drop down in the tags tab. Get it right, Jeremy. So as they switched to, every time they switched to the tags tab, they had one of these. No amount of clicking on any of the tags would remove it. So I imagine everybody on the call is all too horribly aware of the cause of that is these state tiddlers, and that up until so state tiddler is used to maintain the current state of a piece of user interface. So this guy here is telling us which tab is selected, and so as I switch tabs, you can see that piece of state changing. The issue is that the drop downs are also done in the same way. So while a drop down is down, there is a tiddler that corresponds to it that says make this drop down be here, and it's that tiddler that was persisting persisted in unneededly. So the solution I've gone for is to suppress all tiddlers starting with the word state when we save changes. So it's this guy here. So we've got a few places where, well, 3 places where there's a filter that describes which tiddlers should be saved when we save changes. So there's an empty version which just saves the system tiddlers and a full version which saves everything. And we've just added that bit to remove anything with that prefix. So hopefully this will deal with it. We've had a steady trickle of people who've been confused by this mechanism. So hopefully that will improve things for them. The concern is that it also means, so right now, if I purposefully save this tiddler, the pleasant side effect is that when I restart, when I reopen the wiki, it'll open back on the same page. And if we, by suppressing saving those state tiddlers, then of course that doesn't happen. So I use that a lot on my notes wiki over here, for instance. If I switch to the recent tab, so this is an old 5.012 or something, I do save changes, I just done a refresh, and as you can see, it's come straight back onto the recent tab. And things like the, whichever, if I go onto the Tools tab of Control Panel, do save changes and do a refresh, yeah, it's stuck onto. So that's the trade-off, really. The intention of the design was to make it possible that the user interface state can be persisted between sessions, and then you get the behavior you see here, the quite handy thing of tabs staying where you put them and so on. But the trade-off is if we do that, then there's the possibility of an extraneous one of those state tiddlers, as I say, confusing an end user. So we'll see how it goes, but it seems as though in the end it was worth fixing, because the I think anything that confuses beginner users, people who haven't even started the journey of learning TiddlyWiki in detail, I think we need to pay attention to. TiddlyWiki is complex enough without it having baffling bits of behavior that don't make much intuitive sense.
Jeremy,
Hi.
about saving with IE. I did test it yesterday with the IE extension. Is it supposed to work? Because I couldn't get it to work.
I tried it a while ago. I haven't tried it for quite a while, I would say. There was you should be able to see on you should be able to see on GitHub somewhere. There was some problems with it. I don't know, 2 or 3 releases ago, and I was in touch then with the guy who'd originally contributed the IE stuff.
Okay, now I will have a look.
If it's still not working, it'd be worth raising a ticket. What version of IE did you try?
One moment, I think it's 11. The latest one was 8.1.
Okay, well, I might give it a go as well. It's always fun when I get bored to download another developer edition of Windows 8.1. Consume some of that free bandwidth that the world has given us. So that was state tiddlers. I think I had started it last week, was external tiddlers. External images. So I've completed that work. So one part of that, and in fact one of the original drivers, was making so that on tiddlywiki.com there are some big images that I would like to include, and so I wanted to make them lazily loaded, and they are this server architecture diagram and this TiddlyWiki architecture diagram. So I showed you these before. I did them for a presentation back in April, and for some time I've wanted to put them on tiddlywiki.com because they are the most accurate and helpful diagrams that we have for the architecture, but they're both about 250K. So now you can see that they're referenced directly into the images folder, whilst other images like this guy are still being rendered as a base64 data URI in the normal way. What I've done for tiddlywiki.com is within the additions folder, here. So now the build action for building the index file. First thing we do is a save tiddlers to save all tiddlers tagged external images. And then similarly, when we do the set field to create the canonical URI field, which I showed you about last time, we use that same expression. So by changing this filter expression in those currently 3 places, you're able to finally control which images are treated as external. So hopefully that is going to be useful for people with photo galleries and so on. Although they're not really images, I also added the same thing for HTML tiddlers. So if I create an HTML tiddler, text HTML, and give it a canonical URI field, and then give that a nice URI and save. So now, oh, okay, I've already got a tiddler called TiddlyWiki in mind. Okay, so we've encountered. I'm not quite sure why that OK isn't working, but there's obviously something about our logic for checking whether a tiddler has changed that's broken, which is something we've had problems with in the past as well. So let me do it a different way. I'm going to. Hi, sorry, Mario.
Just give it a different name. Doesn't work.
I think that the issue is to do with the comparison it does when you press done to see whether things change. But so what I'll do is I'll save a version of classic TiddlyWiki, like that. So that should have gone into my downloads folder. There it is. And I'm now going to copy this into the wiki folder for tiddlywiki.com. So editions, tiddlers, paste it in there, and then we need to just give it a meta file. So, there it is. In fact, I don't even need that because I can just reference it. Right, sorry, forgive me for that. So I've created a single additional file, which is a tiddler called tiddlywiki-classic.html with a canonical URI and a type text HTML. This time I've got it right. When I rebuild, we should have, I can search for it here. What do they call it in the end? TiddlyWiki Classic. Gosh, I'm so sorry, guys. This is what frequently seems to go wrong when I try and do things live. Oh, here we go, tiddlywiki-classic.html. So, sorry, finally. Here we are displaying a tiddler that, when we look at it in the text editor, we can see that all it has is a title, a type of text HTML, and a canonical URI. And when we display it, it automatically gets displayed within an iframe, which you can see, whoops, up there. That's also now the case for when we copy and paste fragments of HTML from another browser. So I'm going to do a slightly peculiar thing, which is on here, copy HTML from from Safari, because it has slightly better fidelity for when you copy HTML, and then paste it into Chrome, because only Chrome has the paste support. Oh yes, I remember I had to do this before. I'm going to have to change the. Not quite sure why I'm having to change the content type manually. And now, okay, so it wasn't a very useful bit of HTML, but you can see that it's displayed in an iframe. That's good because it means that if the HTML is dangerous, contains script tags and so on, that it's properly sandboxed. So previously, that content would have just been displayed natively, chucked into a div. Does that make sense? I fear that my stumbles in trying to create an HTML tiddler may have made that demo less clear than it should have been, but did that make sense?
Yeah. I also think I saw an issue somewhere. If you just I don't know, edit fields but not the text, then there is a problem. It's probably the.
I think that's the
we have.
same detection code.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
really annoying. I think I mentioned this before. It was a contribution, and a very welcome one, for a useful feature. My mistake. I didn't check it as rigorously as I should have done, and we've had endless problems from that bit of code. That there were, and I think possibly still are, assumptions about tiddler equivalents that are just wrong.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's nice that there is an iframe now, so there is a sandbox, and it's also possible now that you have this on-click stuff, so and it should just work.
Yes, the plan is also to support the seamless iframe attribute. So I think no browsers support it yet, but it lets you have an iframe with quite cool characteristics. It can see the CSS of the surrounding page, or it inherits the CSS of the surrounding page, and you can easily arrange it so that it adopts the height of the content within the iframe. And so at that point, you start to be able to do really nice things with sandbox fragments of HTML. Okay, so there was one very small change that was requested by somebody, and I can't remember whether it was on the discussion groups or in or on GitHub. But the issue is about having a path for the server. So sorry, not explaining, but well at all. By default, if I run the server command and then visit TiddlyWiki in the browser, it's being served from the root folder. Now, sometimes if you're sharing with another server, then it's useful to be able to arrange things so that there is a subpath before the wiki. So that's now done. Let me stop the server. There's an additional path prefix parameter. So we have now, what's this? We're now on like 8 parameters for the server command, which is a bit embarrassing, and we need to find another way to specify all these bits of configuration. But anyway, it's the slow process of mopping up, of being a good citizen as an HTTP server. So I've made quite a few changes over the months, which have been from people trying to run TiddlyWiki with Apache as a proxy and under Nginx and all that kind of thing. And very keen that TiddlyWiki should not just work in those configurations, but that it should be configurable and usable in the kind of expected way. People in the Node.js world have pretty clear expectations of what how a server tool is going to expose itself. And the final exciting thing that I was going to talk about was global macros. So for various reasons, I'd been flagged. What's it called? This was something that we would do as part of a bigger refactoring of the parsing mechanism, but it turned out that I kind of had it wrong, that it was possible to do global macros without doing the full reparsing. So what we've got to do it is a new widget called import variables, and you can see an example of it being used in the page template. Yes, here we go. So within the page template, we've now added an import variables widget that wraps around, in fact, everything that's in the page template, all the way down to that outer set. The import variables widget takes a filter expression, which gives us a list of tiddlers, and then it takes the macro definitions from the top of those tiddlers. So if those tiddlers contain a set variable widget sort of deep inside, it won't see them. So basically that means it'll see the macros defined at the top with the defined pragma in the usual way. And then they all get jammed into the widget tree, and then the import variables widget inserts its actual content. So the end result is as if exactly what I said, it extracts the set variable widgets from each of these tiddlers and stacks them up together with its content in the middle. So the big change that we were able to do was to get rid of the page macros. Well, Git's done something really stupid. Git decided that I wasn't deleting page macros, but that I was renaming page macros to tabs.tid. So what I've now done is we've got a folder core wiki macros, which if I show you on here, core wiki macros is the 3 tiddlers worth of global macros that the core is currently shipping with. So you can see the system tag to say I'm a global macro, and if we go back to that expression, the filter expression, you may have seen that it purposefully includes page macros as the first tiddler in the list. So that means that users who are upgrading from an earlier version of TiddlyWiki to 5.013 and have customized their page macros, hopefully everything should still just work for them. So there is there's a kind of a, is that clear for everybody, by the way? Just what global macros are and how they work. So the key things are that there was no code changes to startup, for instance. So global macros, the core doesn't really know about global macros. Global macros are entirely implemented here within the page template. So the special function of tags macro is only, it comes entirely from this one line here, which is the one place in the core code where we're saying tiddlers tags macro are special. So it's that's quite nice. It was something that I thought would be another mechanism, and it's just turned out to be another widget and some template changes. There is a slight danger with it, though, which is that people might be tempted to use global macros to store global state. So you could imagine modifying, so if you've got a tiddler tags macro, you can imagine changing the text of that tiddler dynamically to dynamically change the definition of the macro. But the trouble is, if any of these tiddlers change, then everything within the import variables widget gets refreshed. So it means that if you do use that technique, every time one of those page macros changes, that you'll get an entire full hard refresh of the entire display, which is fine if you're doing something like switching language. Switching language by definition has to pretty much refresh the whole page, but you wouldn't want to be doing that in response to a user activity that happens any more frequently than something like changing to a different language. Does that all make sense?
Does it scope those macros when you bring them in with input variables to the area that is the child of the import variables, or
That's right.
did they just get injected directly?
No, that's exactly what you said at first. That the action of import variables is to make those macros available to its content.
Okay, cool.
So just within it. And that, well, I mean, it means that you can use import variables elsewhere for other things besides just implementing global macros, I suppose. Useless name though should be, because of course in TiddlyWiki, import usually means importing tiddlers from somewhere else, and here we're using it in the sort of programming language sense. So I must say I wouldn't mind a different name for it that didn't use the word import. But the trouble is, that is, as a programmer, that is rather how I see the operation that's being performed here. So that's me. I'm now working on the I forget the number of it. The ticket for environment variables. So it's quite an sort of 5.4 something. Where is it? Yeah, 5.3.1. So I'm working on this, which I think we discussed before, and then the other things that have been discussed for 5.13 is to minor modifications for tank, but I think otherwise by doing that, yes, that'll be us for 5.013. So hopefully release it either tomorrow or Thursday. With any luck. Screen share. Any questions from any of that? Anything else that anybody would like to see in 5.13?
The environment variables, I missed that.
Oh, the environment variables thing, this is so that you can, I think you were involved in the discussion once before, it's so that you can use an environment variable to point at the folder that contains, or point at a list of folders that contains the plugin library that you wish to use. So, sorry, I've explained that terribly badly, Stephan. But you can, just like the path variable, you can point TiddlyWiki plugin path at a list of folders. Then when you, in a wiki, say, I want the plugin XY, it'll look through that list of folders after having looked in the main core library. Oh, and I just did the thing where I was showing you something on my screen whilst forgetting that I wasn't screen sharing. So I'll continue to screen share in case that happens again. Yeah, so I was just showing you the 5.3.1 thing. And it's a very simple fix, but as I think, Mario, you might have looked in this area before. It's a part of the boot kernel that's just a bit messy. There's a fair bit of duplication in the code that's always been crying out for a bit of refactoring. So I'm just taking the chance to sort that out as well. Otherwise, I was hoping to discuss this point. Perhaps if Danielo turns up, we'll get a chance to do that. A bit about this. Tom's got an issue, which I guess we'll discuss if Tom turns up. Yeah, I think that's all the. I don't think there's anything new in there to discuss at the moment.
I don't see one issue that I opened some time ago about 4 new filters.
Yeah, those are in here, are they? Is it this? No. That, I don't think they ever made it through to a pull request, Stephan, actually.
No, it's not a pull request. It's just that I suggest that we get these 4 new filters.
Okay. Let's just bring
filtering the dates, so that we don't have just this same day filter, but earlier and later.
Oh yes, this is the stuff for yeah. Yes, I mean, do you want to go ahead and make a pull request for this?
No, not yet. And I thought I'm not sure whether I understood the same day stuff correctly. So I just posted what I think should work, and it seems to work. But I think someone, you, should take a look whether I did it right, and then I think it's easy to implement.
Okay, I'll have another look. Let me make a note.
And I'm just asking this now because just a few days ago someone asked on the group.
Yes. But yeah, no, I think those could be done straightforwardly. And I'll try and get them in. I'm very keen to get to, well, say I want to get this out by Thursday at the latest. So if that would be the only, if it was going to push me beyond Thursday, would be the only reason to not do it. Okay, so where I am now in terms of what I think remains to be done, we've got these things noted down for 5.14, which is refactoring the parsers basically, and adding a new tiddler widget so that we can do a new journal function within the core. But in fact, I think the area that really needs attention is, well, 2 things actually. Backups, which I think I promised for 12 and didn't do for TiddlyFox. But a decent upgrade wizard, which isn't. Well, it doesn't really explain it here. But the import wizard would be almost the same thing as the upgrade wizard. Oh no, there it is. Improve upgrade process. Right. So I think that's a big obstacle at the moment that we had when 5.012 came out. We had a number of people who ran into problems with upgrading that was basically because they were using plugins that they hadn't upgraded. And you know, unfortunately, what you have to say to people for fixing that is really nightmarish. It's go out on the internet and find the updated version of the plugin that you want and drag it in, etc. So I just think I can't really imagine. I think it would be a nightmare to support a lot of users through any subsequent upgrades unless we fix this. So as it happens, fixing it would also imply fixing the other issue that we were discussing with Danielo last week, which is the ability to do a sync rather than an import. And so, in fact, to me, that's just a import operation where the default state of the checkboxes that you get for choosing whether an individual tiddler should be imported, where that default state is determined by, you know, the merge algorithm that you're using. And based on my past experience using modified date as a merge algorithm with latest date wins is not a bad way to go. Works pretty well. So with any luck, that one piece of work will improve the import process, give us a sync process, and give us a much better user experience for upgrades. I think I talked a bit about it before, the upgrade process. It's quite a challenge because we want it to be simple, take minimal interaction. We also want to get as much flexibility out of it as we can, because it's through the upgrade process that we might, for instance, in the future, be able to deprecate features which are breaking, in an upgrade that we're performing. I would like people to be able to upgrade by visiting tiddlywiki.com and doing something, but it also is very important that people can upgrade a whole load of wikis by downloading a single zip file that contains everything, and then going off the internet, so to speak, and upgrading using that zip file to upgrade actual TiddlyWiki HTML files. So getting all that done, quite a challenge to figure out the best approach. But sorry, Mario.
Jeremy and Danielo joined.
Oh, great. Danielo, hello. How are you doing? Hi, Danielo.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Hello, would you like to say hi and introduce yourself?
I'm from Madrid in the center of Spain. And I have been hearing you for a while, but I don't know what are you talking about exactly. So just continue the conversation.
Indeed, we were just talking about the upgrade process. So the issue, Danielo, is that for TiddlyWiki users that are using version 12 that are using any plugins, as things stand, when they upgrade to 13, the plugins will not get upgraded, and in some cases will break. So we need to, the goal of the upgrade process was always that the upgrade process could consult the plugin library to automatically upgrade plugins as required. And yeah, that's where we need to get to, where for users there's a single upgrade operation, and it might say, we've upgraded your wiki, we've also been able to upgrade all your plugins, or it might say, sorry, you're using some plugins that we don't currently have upgrades for, recommend you stick with the current version, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But I was saying that it's difficult, which is probably why I've been putting it off. But Danielo had some specific issues that it would be good to discuss. The first one was about codemirror. So as I understood it, the issue is with the way that at the moment, if you load the codemirror plugin, then everywhere you've got an edit text widget that is multi-line, it automatically gets changed into a codemirror instance. And I think, Mario, your concerns with that may have been performance, because I guess it means there's frequently using TiddlyWiki 5, there's a lot of codemirror instances consuming JavaScript memory. But what else were you concerned about?
Okay, I made a diagram, a picture that I can share with you if you want to see, about how I think this should work. And I think the way codemirror plugin works in TiddlyWiki Classic. I don't know if you can see right now my screen.
Yeah.
Here's the edit plugin, which is in the top of the edit template, and depending on the type, of the content, the bitmap or text, it selects the appropriate editor. And what I would propose is the add another editor which use the codemirror plugin just for the text control JavaScript.
Yeah. And the concern, or not the concern, but the reason why it's not like that at the moment is because we wanted to make it so that when you loaded the codemirror plugin, if you installed it, that it would automatically adjust any what's the word? Any places where it made sense to use codemirror without users having to adjust the underlying templates. So let me show you, just to be clear, not just for you, Danielo, because I think you've got all of this, but just wanted to make sure that everybody else sees this. So So at the moment, we've got this edit text widget. So just to recap, we've got an edit widget that, exactly as Danielo draws, it chooses one of 3 specific widgets depending on the type that is being edited. So there's a text editor, a bitmap editor, or this kind of dummy binary editor. And so what the codemirror plugin does is basically take over the edit text widget. And you can see that if we go and look at the codemirror source.
For me, that's a problem.
You can see that here he is reaching into the edit text widget, and then armed with that variable, there's a few places there where we inject methods such as post render. So the alternative would have been that in order to use the codemirror editor, that you would have to manually make some configuration change to tell the editor to use that widget. But I think there's a simple workaround, which is that the codemirror editor could expose itself as 2 different widgets. First, as this edit text widget, as the modified edit text widget, but also as an edit-codemirror widget that always used codemirror. And then in here that we've got, yes, here we would. Sorry, I'm failing to find.
What are you looking for?
Where are those mapping tiddlers, Danielo? That we use to map from the type and configure that guy. Edit type mapping. So where are they created? Ah, in the config folder. Okay.
Yeah, the config.
Right. So under the suggestion I'm making there, in order for, if somebody wanted to use codemirror for, I know this still wouldn't be quite enough, but basically you'd put.
Here is the.
Yeah, and then that would cause application JavaScript to be invoked for. With the editor widget edit-codemirror. So as long as we have a codemirror widget defined, that would pull together. But of course, I'm realizing that under that configuration, one would also want to turn off the automatic codemirror automatically taking over the edit text widget. So maybe, yeah, not sure. I'm not sure what the best solution to this is. But what you're suggesting, Daniela, the problem with that is that it would, if I understand correctly, if we just adopted a different type, it would mean that anybody using the codemirror widget would have to edit their edit some configuration. No, I see what you mean though, because we could, the codemirror widget could just bring in some of these editor type mappings, tiddlers, couldn't it? You're right. You're right, Daniela. It doesn't need to subclass the edit text widget at all.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That you don't have to override text, and you can, if you want to use codemirror, just have to change the content type while you're editing, and you have all the powerful.
Well, no, the codemirror plugin would ship with a bunch of these editor type mappings that would automatically switch to codemirror for the various types that it makes sense to. And then you would be able to override these editor type mappings with your own customizations if you wanted to.
Excuse me, Jeremy, I didn't hear you.
So I was saying that under the new proposal, that the codemirror plugin will expose itself as a new widget called edit-codemirror. And it will no longer override the edit text widget, and that we would also ship the include in the codemirror plugin a number of config editor type mappings, tiddlers, that would cause it to use codemirror for those types where it makes sense. And of course, all these editor type mappings could be adjusted by a user if they wanted to override the defaults. That's not bad, because these guys are meant to be configured, obviously.
And I think that sets a good precedent for other types of editor plugins in the future to kind of follow.
Yeah. And it gets rid of that horrible superclassing. Yeah, no, it's way better. A way better approach. So, Daniele, sorry, my apologies for it taking me a while to process what you were suggesting. But,
okay,
maybe I've got that now. So I'm just making a quick note. Cool. Anything else from you, Daniela, or indeed anybody?
Let me see my checklist. I think there's something. Not currently, I think. I think that was all that I want to talk about.
Well, in terms of, let's pick up the conversation a bit about the future. I was saying that the next big area for me is the upgrade process, and that I think that's a big obstacle. We cannot go out of beta until that is done. But when we look at the roadmap on here, so I'm talking about these two things. So in order for the upgrade process to do what I'm envisaging, it means also establishing the plugin library so that the upgrade process can have access to the upgraded plugins. But if we take those out, then I think now we're getting pretty close to being able to call the end of beta, even though we've still got some of these things not done. I think we're getting to the point where it's more valuable to move TiddlyWiki out of beta so that people can start to rely on it, and particularly to rely on it not changing, than it is to wait for every last thing. And in fact, I'm realizing I need to do quite a few updates of these, actually. So the other concern I have is with the content. So right now, most of what you read when you visit tiddlywiki.com is old. Text, like for instance, particularly this features tiddler, is really old. This goes back 2.5 years or so. So right back at the beginning, when TiddlyWiki 5 was just it was a bit of a ragtag of features, and so in the very early days, this features tiddler just picked out the things that were working that were interesting for people to play with. So that's why there's things like the the way to get at the demos of the wizards and notifications and so on. But now that makes no sense at all as a way for people to learn about TiddlyWiki. So I think I need to really reorganize this. I know that just sitting down and deciding to reorganize content isn't really sufficient to drive me to make kind of worthwhile improvements. So my plan is to introduce a hierarchical table of contents, because I think that would benefit some readers, some users who anyway like the idea of being able to work their way through, sequentially work their way through a bunch of information and know when they've reached the end of it. So that would be one of the valuable things of having a table of contents would be to allow people to do that. And it would make it easier for me to see the holes in the documentation as well. So I'll fiddle around with this probably for 5.014, but my thought is to, now that we've got global macros, we can do some global macros that do some nice hiding and showing, of hierarchical children of a table of contents.
Jeremy, would you consider to put information of some external plugins into wiki.com and then some plugins that you find useful? Yes.
Well, that takes you back to the plugin library. So I think what we had on TiddlyWiki Classic was a world where plugins lived on the plugin author's site, and people had to go off to plugin authors' sites in order to find the plugins and in order to get updates. Although it's important that TiddlyWiki 5 is able to work like that, so there will never be anything stopping people from installing a plugin that they got from an arbitrary location. The intention is to formalize a plugin library, so that try and I might draw a picture. Well, no, actually, yes, I can draw a picture in this. So, am I still screen sharing, or are you looking at my face?
You have screen sharing.
Good, good. So, why did I choose a drawing program that I appear to not know how to use very well? Here we go.
What's very Dropbox-like?
Say again?
The other sketch that you have on your screen looks Dropbox style.
Thank you. Yes, I'll take that to be a good thing. They're done obviously manually, and then scanned. Right. Try again. Okay. So in TiddlyWiki, there's the idea of the core. So the core is everything actually that's in the core folder of the TiddlyWiki repo. And the core, as you know, in TiddlyWiki 5 is packaged as a plugin. And then there's the next layer out is some kind of plugins that have been adopted by the core team. So things like the codemirror plugin. I think it makes sense for it to have the same kind of shared ownership as TiddlyWiki itself. It's not part of the core, but it's part of the core library, I'm going to call it. So let's actually put some labels in for some of these things. So we got the core library. Remembered. Core library. And then core library with an extra T on the end. And then the main library of plugins. So the idea is that the core is the smallest thing that can support TiddlyWiki. You know, so we try and keep the core reasonably small. The core library is the things like the full screen plugin would be a good case in point, or something that isn't in the core, just to keep the core as small as possible, but is very much an important piece of functionality that can't just be left to third parties. And then you've got the library, which would be where plugins have been contributed by somebody else. They're still owned by somebody else, so there'd be a Danielo bit of the library. And they're still responsible for the plugin, but they're using tiddlywiki.com to distribute the updates. So we need to get quite a lot figured out to make this work in terms of the technical bits, and that's the bit that concerns me at the moment. What are, in order to do an upgrade process, I need to that code needs to have access to the library of plugins, needs to be able to get at metadata about what upgrades are available for what plugins, that kind of thing. So it's sort of technical domain to the problems, but there's also us figuring out what works as a community. And as ever, what we're trying to do is to resolve some tension here, that for end users, it's probably most useful if everything just feels like it's part of TiddlyWiki. And it's a shame that they have to be aware that they're assembling their own custom TiddlyWiki from lots of diverse sources. But from a plugin author's point of view, I think it's often very important that their plugin is discernible as something distinct and separate to TiddlyWiki itself. And I know in the past that for TiddlyWiki Classic, plugin authors have regarded it as being valuable for them to have control over the place where people go to learn about their plugin. So, I mean, I guess, Danielo, what's your Tiddly spot called?
Brain test.
Brain test, of course, forgive me. So, brain test, as well as being a repository of your plugins, is also, it's you on the internet about TiddlyWiki, isn't it? And you've got hints and tips and so on that aren't plugins exactly. So it's a whole bundle of resources, including plugins, and we want that to continue. You shouldn't. The fact that we have a centralized library of plugins shouldn't stop you from having a site to publicize your plugins and to publish your hints and tips. But as I say, the current situation where these are the master copies of these plugins, it breaks one of the requirements I mentioned. So one of the requirements is that users should be able to download a single zip file and then go offline and upgrade a whole load of TiddlyWiki files. So that implies that there is a big blob of stuff that includes all of the plugins that are part of the library. Does that make sense?
If I understand well, I expect the library, the plugin library mechanism, to you select the plugins that you want, and those plugins get download to your TiddlyWiki, so you can walk offline. Because until
no, that's not quite what I'm saying. I'm saying that I can say it in a simpler form, I think, and it is just that TiddlyWiki needs a plugin library, so it's a collection of all of the plugins for TiddlyWiki, and that it needs to be possible to download that plugin library as a single blob, as a single zip file. The reason for that is so that we can run an offline upgrade process. So it's very difficult. There are concerns about whether people are contributing code here, or here. They want to be able to work on stuff in their own fork on GitHub and to be able to select for themselves when to make a release and so on. But one of the problems that we're trying to solve here is orphan plugins. So we've already had this with TiddlyWiki 5, where people have joined the community, created a plugin for their own purposes, and then they haven't been around to update that plugin as future versions of TiddlyWiki come out. So I'm thinking particularly, I think of the visualization plugin, the Viz.js plugin that MK did. I think it's that. And in fact, a couple of Stephan's plugins are in this category as well, I guess. So right now, when that happens, when a plugin is orphaned, there is nothing that the core can do about it. So if you search for that plugin on Google, you're going to get a link to where the plugin was first published. There's no opportunity for us to put a note up saying, by the way, this is a dangerous, obsolete version of the plugin. There's a new version over here. So that's a real challenge. What I would like to be able to do is, in the situation where we've got an orphan plugin, is for the core team to be able to take the plugin on and upgrade it as necessary, and for users to seamlessly get those upgrades. So that, if you think it through, that's a very big challenge. That the tension is plugin authors want to be able to own the way that they publish their plugins. The tension is that if we leave plugin authors to manage the entire process themselves, then I don't think we can offer a decent user experience. And I might even say a safe user experience, because it's important that, you know, plugins are. One of the dangers, for instance, of a plugin being orphaned is that somebody could put up a malware version of that plugin. That's never happened in TiddlyWiki Classic. There's no particular reason to believe that it would happen for us. But if the project got popular, it kind of could. So a lot of what I'm saying here is actually reflects the challenges that you can read about for browser makers with add-ons. So recently Chrome, I think, has implemented a restriction so that now it's only possible to install extensions from the Chrome store, from the Chrome library. And for a long time, Firefox has, in effect, given privileges to plugins that are installed from their centralized add-ons repository. So if you want to, in the case of Firefox, if you want automated updates of your plugins, then you have to use their main plugin library, addons.mozilla.org. So I think the tension that we're experiencing, you see all over the place, everywhere where there is a plugin library. All I know in terms of, so I haven't got all the answers figured out yet, but I think it's a tension between the needs of users and the needs of developers. When that happens, I think my instinct must be to put the needs of users first. And particularly, you know, that means thinking about what's good for a user if they're trying to keep content in TiddlyWiki they want to be able to refer to in 20 years' time, for instance. And I think that's the most useful perspective for us to adopt, even though we may well end up making a mechanism that isn't the most convenient for a plugin author. Well, not so much most convenient, but doesn't give them the most control. But that's really what this is about, is shifting a bit of control from plugin authors to the central library so that users don't get left high and dry.
Jeremy?
Hiya.
I think the picture that you draw is also let's say the stable branch. So if the stuff is loaded from this repository, then the user should be sure that it really works together, so that there are not big glitches between different plugins. But for the development, if you release a new beta or something, so the development of a plugin needs to go on also. Then the beta plugin can be part of I don't know, any GitHub repository or anywhere. So you can publish a TiddlyWiki and use the drag and drop.
Absolutely. So nothing will stop. Will ever stop people doing it the manual way who need side loading your TiddlyWiki, as it might be called. Anyway, as to say, I think the way to tackle it first is to think there's technical requirements, and those are fairly unforgiving. The one that I've been focusing on there about how we need to be able to run the upgrade process offline. That determines an awful lot of the shape of a reasonable solution here. So I'll try and come up with a first, a straw man that we can discuss.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tricky one. And then, as I say, I think once we're through that, then I think we're starting to be seriously looking at coming out of beta.
Mm-hmm.
A short relief. So, Danielo, did that answer your questions?
Yeah, you
We
did.
can go into this in a bit more detail if you like. One of the things that I've been thinking about is that maybe a plugin, plugin needs to say which versions of TiddlyWiki it works with, and that's so that the upgrade process can detect plugins that don't work with the current version and reject them. So if we look at Danielo's plugin here as an example, there's a whole load of information about the plugin in the fields here. And one possibility is that it's, so let me switch to, sorry, switch to a plugin in my editor because it's a bit easier for me to make changes.
For example, you can see it needs, there's no.
So, well, what we could do, imagine this. Yeah, so that would be one simple way of a plugin declaring which versions of TiddlyWiki it works with. But the concern I have with that is that if I was writing a plugin, I'd be jolly tempted to then do this. Yeah, where I'm just saying, yeah, it's going to work with the next 5 versions. Why not? And so I'm wondering.
For me, that's very similar to, you can see, for example, in the Cecily plugin.info, there is a core version field that it says it will work with any version of 5, for example, or 5.0.8.
So I'd forgotten about that. So that, I think, isn't a goer at all, because basically what that lets you express is just that there are versions of TiddlyWiki that don't support this plugin at all. So it prevents you from installing the plugin on a version of the core that's too old. So that's quite useful, but it's not really the problem that we have. The problem that we have is people doing an upgrade. So any plugin that just says, yeah, I'm okay for version 5.0.0 onwards is saying you can upgrade me freely, where really what we need is for the plugin to say, yep, I've been tested on 5.0.12 and I work. So there is a way that we could do that. We could make it so that instead of recording the version number, that we perhaps, I don't know, make it up like this, that we do that kind of thing. So alongside, when we do a new release, we would generate a token for each release that's just a random string of digits. And then and that token for version 13 wouldn't be known until version 13 was published. But then what you'd look for in the plugin is that actual token. So that basically proves that the plugin was created after that version of TiddlyWiki.
But then at the end you only have the tokens there, because there is no need for the other stuff.
I was leaving the version number in for human readability, but yeah, of course you're right. You only need the tokens. So if we go to, as I mentioned before, that this is an area where really we shouldn't be having to invent things. We should do what's worked for other places. So they have exactly the same problem in Firefox. What they let you do that's really quite clever is, without uploading a new version of the plugin, you can update the version compatibility information. So where is it? Somewhere in here. Manage status and versions. Yeah, here we go.
Instead of
so when I go into this release, I can then, here you go, I can change those settings without needing to upload a new version. And indeed, I do that I have to do that fairly frequently. So you could imagine us having the same thing, where we don't need to wait for a plugin author to have submitted a new version of the plugin. We can just update the metadata within the plugin library to say this plugin is okay with this version of TiddlyWiki. And then at that point, when you do the download, you'd get that information representing that.
Jeremy, maybe you can take some ideas instead of software, desktop software. There are other wikis which have plugins like doku-wiki, which also has a widget.
Yeah, no, I'm very interested in any other systems that are similar. I mean, npm is the other one that I think about a lot, because npm, I think, is not at all what TiddlyWiki end users want, but it's clearly would be incredibly useful for developers to be able to install TiddlyWiki plugins with npm. But you think you mentioned doku-wiki? I haven't come across it. I'm not really familiar with it. But so the criteria is, I'm interested in any other system where they maintain a plugin library, a centralized plugin library, and where that plugin library is not just a list of links. So in some situations, the plugin library might be, say, just include a link to somewhere else where you can get the actual plugin. So the ones, but I'm not interested in that class of plugin library, because that doesn't meet our needs. I'm interested in the ones that, as I say, actually store the plugin content.
If you can see the link that I post in the chat, okay, in that plugin library, you can see to which version it's compatible with. Description, instructions, how to install. I think you're thinking about something like that. On the very top, you can see compatibility.
Right, and that's a version number that is. Okay, so where does that compatibility information come from? Has it been manually tested against those versions, or what?
I think they are user tested. I've seen some projects that work in a similar way. If you come by and you test a different version, also probably with Firefox add-on, then you can say, okay, I have tested it with Firefox, blah blah blah, and this plugin still works even if their version number is wrong or something like this. So this is user managed most of the time.
At the end,
I'll have a further look. That could be interesting. I mean, if I do a download, well, it's okay. So when I do a download, it looks like it's coming from the guy's own website. Do you see that if you look down at the hover hint down there, it's coming from ralstonrats.co.uk, which I think must be his site. Let's find a different plugin. Yeah, and again, this is just going off to somebody's GitHub repo. So this is an example of a plugin library where they've got metadata about the plugin stored centrally, where users can update that metadata, and where the actual plugin is resident somewhere else. And as I say, with that, that's not quite, I think, sufficient to meet our needs. But keep pitching them along. I mean, the other one I think I mentioned before, possibly, is Atom. Have you seen Atom? It's the GitHub editor, and boff. Yeah, here we go. So it offers you updates. They've got a really nice, simple way of installing stuff. You can
the brackets plugin work in a similar way. I think they have a centralized GitHub repo somewhere where you have to have a pull request, and then your library is pulled, I think. So it's like a snapshot of your library, which is pulled to the central repo.
And how?
This is a good editor.
Update manager.
Okay, so brackets registry about. Okay, well, it'll take me a bit of figuring out to understand what's going on here, I think.
Yeah, but if you install brackets, then they have a nice manager, and I think you can see the links somewhere. So there is always
got brackets, but it's an old version, I think.
Yeah, they have new versions.
Does it not?
But also there, the cool thing is that you get the information. For example, so instead of install, then you get an update button. So you get the information. So there are 3 plugins that are possible to update, and then you can say update, and then it loads it from somewhere, but I'm not sure anymore from where.
Yeah, well, it looks to me as though their requirement is that that a brackets plugin be in its own GitHub repo. But that it seems to leave them in the locations that the authors put them in. Gosh, I hate Bootstrap now. It's great that there's competition with these things, though, isn't it? With brackets and Atom. Very exciting. But okay, and any other thoughts about useful templates? Do let me know. Very interested in any of these.
I just want to talk about one plugin I'm working on, and I want to know what do you think about me, because if you think it's
go for it, Danielo. I'd be most interested to see. Knowing you, it'll be quite interesting.
Excuse me?
Well, based on the other things that you've done, I'm expecting something quite interesting. So go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to screen share. Oh, no, this is screen sharing. Okay, recently I just closed my pull request of the import tiddler function. Okay, and I tried to move that functionality into a plugin, so you can use or not use it. Okay, I don't know if you can see my screen right now.
It's not. We can't see the screen at the moment.
I can see it.
I can't. But,
I can see it here as well.
Jeremy,
Oh,
you
okay.
are still screen sharing. Probably that's a problem.
Well, on screen share. But I'm still no. I'm not even seeing the green.
But you still have a green arrow, but you are not screen sharing anymore.
It's just being slow. Danielo, do you want to just try unscreen sharing and screen sharing again, just to see if that...
Yeah, sure. I'm sharing right now again.
No, I'm still not seeing it. You go.
I can see it here.
We can see it, yeah. I can see it too.
Wow. Hello.
Yeah, you have been there 2 times for a second or two.
Yeah, no, weird. I just got bounced off, which but anyway, the good thing is that now I can see Danielo's screen clearly. Now that it's re-added me.
Here is just you can see a TiddlyWiki, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this is just a test of the user interface. Okay, this is for manage import other files. Okay, here you can see the widget. It's here itself with some parameters. This is the only parameter right now, the rules. Okay, I want to show it up first. Here you can choose which rules apply. There are other kind of rules, okay, that are also implemented, but currently I only have user interface for this one. Okay, so let's say new ones wins if you got a conflict.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is the same document. Okay, so I expect no input, no import from this one. Okay, and you have here the not import list of widgets, and the reason this is because it's a plugin which is older, because a new version already exists, or because they are identical to the existing one. Okay, if I choose a different file, I expect some other, not import, just the plugins, but there's the same again, newer that also exists, identical, and import. This is the new stuff, 90 pillars, and if you change the rules, for example, the older wins, you can see a good sample. Output, this one, not import, because they are older, identical, and here you have a list of import tiddlers that are overridden. Okay, you can also specify other kind of rules that are called import rules, I think. And you say tags, no, import tags. I think that's the way.
So what does that do?
That it's a filter include, which only allows include index, okay, which would only import tiddlers that have that tag. So I have to go to this one, for example. Not import, because they are filtered, because they don't have the index tag, all of them. And here I expect to be some import, which are new manual programming topics windows which have the index tag. Okay, if you, this is not working currently, okay, but if you click the confirm button, it will import those tiddlers. In this case, it's just a list. It's just an experiment with this will be imported. I have plans to make this. I don't know.
That's interesting. So how are you storing the when you click the import button and browse for the file, then you're bringing the tiddlers in, and at that point,
yeah, it's just an array of tiddlers. So this could, if you have to import a very large amount, you have you need to have enough RAM because it's stored in RAM. I can try some techniques to free up RAM, like I don't know if this makes sense, but the handle import tiddlers event. Here you have another array of JSON tiddlers. Maybe you can erase this one to save some RAM, but currently my idea is to store an array of tiddlers in RAM and then click confirm and make the import.
It's very difficult where those tiddlers are going to get stored. This is the hold up for me. So the way I look at the problem is that what we want to be able to do is to have the user browse for a file, to extract all of the tiddlers within that file, and then to allow the user to interact with a summary to choose which of the tiddlers they actually want to import. And in some cases, they might want to override things like the type of an incoming tiddler, particularly if you've done a drag and drop file operation. So that implies that the import operation needs to have two phases. The first phase brings the tiddlers into a temporary area, and then what you called the confirmation phase actually imports the tiddlers for real. Now the issue is that all of this is happening within some kind of import widget within the render tree. So it can't, if it's anything that it stores in memory is liable to be deleted if that widget gets or if a parent of that widget gets refreshed. Yeah. So for instance, you know, a page macro changes and then bang, the tiddler that you're doing the import in changes. So we need to devise a new place that we can store these temporary tiddlers on the way in. And this is one of the main issues that I need to work on as well for the upgrade process, because the upgrade process is actually a special variant of the import process. So yeah, my rough idea is, well, I'm still thinking about this, but a potential approach is to store the incoming tiddlers in a single tiddler in the same format as a plugin. So in other words, a JSON tiddler that contains all the individual tiddlers that could be imported. And then the user interface that we give the user to allow them to confirm which tiddlers should get imported would work somehow by operating on these tiddlers within a tiddler. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. At the very first version, I didn't want to allow two files to select if you want to import or not. I just want to to give some filters, some rules, and then follow the normal, the usual way. Okay, I just want to give the user some more tools to manage the import, but I don't have.
Oh yeah, no, I think the way you've done it is very clever, because you've been able to add this conflict resolution essentially without modifying the user interface of the import operation itself. And yeah, that's pretty cool. That gets us some functionality that's important and useful. It was the reason why I started talking about the user interface stuff was because of the me seeing your confirm example. You know, when you wanted to, which is the example that raises the same problem where you need to store those tiddlers somewhere until they've been confirmed in the user interface.
We can call this a workaround for people that want to try it out. This is for
yes. Well, it illustrates something that I think is a very important thing about the way that projects like TiddlyWiki work or can work, which is that the core of TiddlyWiki needs to, once we get out of beta, it needs to kind of slow down a bit. We need to be very cautious about making changes to the core, because every change that we make to the core has a potential impact on every other plugin. So we need to be. So in the meantime, that means that extending the functionality of TiddlyWiki and running experiments in plugins is the best way for users to gain the experience of potential new features, so that we can learn more about them and assess, you know, what, if anything, the core should do about them. So we had a lot of this in TiddlyWiki Classic. In the early days, things like tagly tagging was a plugin, and then elements of it were incorporated into the core. The thing that happened with TiddlyWiki Classic, though, was that process pretty much stopped. So by the time you got to things like the tagged template tweak and for each tiddler plugin, which are two bits of the TiddlyWiki Classic ecosystem that I think almost everybody uses who's doing serious customization work, you know, we never pulled those into the core, and TiddlyWiki Classic would have been much better off if we'd made those be official, well, in fact, built-in plugins, built-in macros. But yeah, so it's great, Danielo. And the key thing is that people who are doing work on TiddlyWiki shouldn't feel like Jeremy is an obstacle to making progress. You know, it's one of the advantages of open source is it's decentralized. So it should be, yeah, it's a kind of. You shouldn't have to wait to get permission to modify the core to perform these types of experiments.
I think this is why the plugin mechanisms make TiddlyWiki cool, because you can customize it however you want, and you can try experiment, as you said, experiment. You want this one to be an experimental one.
Yeah.
And I don't expect this to be moved into the core or in the plugins
I think that
library.
something similar will eventually be, because the use case is very clear. But I'd rather do it when we've got a user interface as well. But I think that there's a philosophical thing going on, that what plugins do. You know, in an open source project, the amazing thing is that all of us, with our own distinct requirements, are able to come together and work on a single thing that can satisfy all of our requirements. And yet, when you get to the details, we have very different requirements. I was talking to Mario about some issues to do with accessibility, and he's got very specific requirements about the HTML tags to be used for tiddler titles, which are not shared by probably most other users. But the mechanism that open source projects use almost universally to resolve this tension is a plugin architecture, where, so the way I think of it is a plugin exists to encapsulate that functionality which is too controversial to go into the core, or encapsulates a customization that is incompatible with other people's. And that's really powerful. You know, if that could happen in real life, if you could load a plugin that, you know, I don't know, meant that you, oh, I don't know. So I was going to give a stupid analogy about everyday life, but being able to change the rules of the world around you by loading a plugin is a very powerful thing. It means that we can have requirements that directly contradict one another.
And I also think the very important thing here is that with GitHub or something like this, there you have the possibilities to raise your concerns, just to be sure that that you get heard. And you have your own ideas, you have different ideas, I have my ideas, and at the end I think the solution is something that is quite nice.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. That's what we call the dialectic process. And there was a great example earlier on with Danielo's suggestion about the codemirror plugin.
Yeah, and I think this is important. So you have a possibility to discuss things, then you have a possibility to think about it and even change your mind or read a little bit more or learn a little bit more, and then you see, okay, it works this way and it works the other way, and as it is, it's fine, because then you have the possibility to create a view template or something like this, and it changes the behavior in the way you want. But the core works with a decent default.
Yeah, I mean, I must say I'm finding the GitHub part of this such an improvement over last time. So in 2004-05, when I was laying the groundwork for TiddlyWiki, for TiddlyWiki Classic, all there was, that was before we had Subversion, so there was no source code control and there's literally only the Google groups. But the difference between how I was working then and working now with GitHub, has had a profound impact on my impression of how the world works.
And if we came to an agreement, we can each one have the possibility. We have the possibility to develop of our own plugin and be a part of the community. So
well, I think one of the now we're talking really about general community management sort of stuff. I do think that there's a few things that I see other open source projects doing that I haven't done yet and that we probably should do. So a very common thing, for instance, is to give people in the community very specific roles, to say that such and such a person is in charge of translations, say. And I think that would be, I'd like to get to the point where it feels just a little bit like we're a team, the people working on TiddlyWiki, and at the moment it doesn't. It doesn't feel much like, doesn't exactly feel like a team like I'm used to at work, because there's no shared responsibility at the moment. All the responsibility pretty much hits me first, and then I dissipate it outwards. But I think if we assembled ourselves, gave ourselves roles and so on, behaved a bit more like a team, that we might be able to offer our users, well, I think we'd accomplish two things. We'd make people feel more involved and more responsible, and we'd make it clearer to the outside world that this is a vibrant group of people and not just Jeremy doing this.
Actually, TiddlyWiki, it's too big to believe that it's only one guy work.
It has taken me such a long time, though, Danielo. I'm embarrassed at how long it's taken. I don't know that.
I think I already 3 different versions of TiddlyWiki in the repository. Yeah. So if you would load an old version, it's quite different.
Indeed, I keep meaning to do I think a fun project. You know that there's this repo that GitHub Pages makes you make. That so this actually corresponds to what's displayed on tiddlywiki.com.
You're not screen sharing, Jeremy.
Oh. Hilarious. You can rely on me to not screen share. So I was just showing you this repo, germaline.github.com, which is the repo for GitHub Pages. So it is the content of tiddlywiki.com. And one of the fun things about it, of course, is that it's got its own commit history going back, quite a while. So if I go back to 25, say, nope, that was too far. No. Guess a number. Okay, so there's 7. Let's try 9. Yeah, so 9. Here we are back in 2012. So we could use Phantom.js to make a movie that animates through how TiddlyWiki's front page has changed in all of that time. And I think that'd be quite a fun project.
Yeah, I think the Docker guys did a video where you could see the contributions, so that the commits from different people. So and it was really fun.
I'd love that. Yeah, if you find a reference to that and there's something that we can run, that would be really fun. I mean,
yeah, I'll have a look, but it's really, I don't know, it even needs 3 minutes or 5 minutes, something like this. And then you can see at the very beginning with, I don't know, 3 or 4 people contributing, and then it starts to explode with different repositories. Yeah. And then you can see the inventor committing there a little bit and there a little bit and there a little bit. So this is a really good animation where you can see people moving around. It's really cool.
Yeah, go on.
I'll have to find the link and post it in the group. It's really fun.
I'd really appreciate that. Some of the things that I'd love to show is, for instance, Bram, who does the Chinese translations. If you have a look, you can see that he started doing a TiddlyWiki 5 translation at the beginning, 3 months ago, February, 4 months ago. And then each of these is 2, in some cases 1 contribution. I know 2, I think, because that's typically a pull request and a commit. But basically, Bram manages to, every time I push a change to the TiddlyWiki language stuff, he manages to push me the Chinese translation within 2 hours. So,
as I saw it, he's always the first one here who has implemented the changes, and I'm always the last one.
Yes, well, so that's a visualization that I'd love, because of course I'm looking forward to a world where hopefully we'll have 30 languages, and so keeping them up to date is going to be a challenge, and one of the ways to make it fun would be to kind of gamify it, so that there's so that you can see at a glance who's doing well and which languages might need to be adopted by somebody new because the person's moved off. Right, we're getting screen share. Oh, I'm not screen sharing. Right, and in fact we should probably draw towards the close now. I've taken 2 actions away. One was for Stephan, was to check ticket 624, which was some additional filter operators that he suggested. The other action, Danielo, is from you, where I will look at doing those code mirror changes. Can't promise them for 5.13 because, as I say, I'm keen to get 5.13 out on time. But I'll certainly endeavour to do so. But any other comments or feedback from anybody?
I would love to see the environment variables in, I don't know.
Oh yes, I'm doing that right now.
Oh wait, that's cool. That's cool.
And I was saying to the guys before, embarrassingly, it's in an area where the code in Boot.js is pretty sloppy. There's quite a lot of duplication, so I'm doing a wee bit of refactoring and nailing another ticket at the same time. But hopefully we'll be committing that later on this evening.
Okay, super.
Great. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining me today. Much appreciated. We'll close the call as usual and then stay on the line for a few minutes to say goodbye. But cheers to everybody. Thank you very much.
I'm briefing.
Thank you for everybody else watching along. Cheers. Bye-bye.